mentioned, both Sofie and I are really happy to be here to have this opportunity to present our discussion paper, which we developed for the Nordic Environmental Footprint Group with this very short and simple title, The Role of the Product Environmental Footprint, Classes of Performance in the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. Yes. We see if this works. Skal jeg trykke på den her, eller hvad? Skal jeg gøre et eller andet?
Altså den der.
Ellers er det den der. Perfect, tak. Okay. Yes, we'll try again. We made an agenda for our presentation for today. First, we want to give a little introduction to what we call the journey of the Eco-Design Directive. Then we want to talk a little bit more about the ESPR and more specifically about its performance, classes of performance. And we will also dive into the PEF-based performance classes before we look into a comparison between the impact categories in PEF, which are emphasized in the ESPR. Then we will look into some additional assessment methods and communication vehicles. And if you get a little bit worried, we have a little bit more time than the rest of the presentation, so I think we will make it. Yes. First of all, we were given the assignment to do this discussion paper examining how PEF can support the classes of performance in the ESPR, and also try and look into which circular aspects might need some additional assessment methods. And doing that, also looking into some of the possibilities and barriers there are. However, before we present these results, we would like to set the scene by providing this introduction to the Eco-Design Directive, because as Gerd also mentioned in the beginning, we are not starting from scratch. We are actually building upon 18 years of work within the Eco-Design Directive, and there is a lot of learning that can be taken away from that. Yes. For those who may not be that familiar with the Eco-Design Directive, it was first adopted back in 2005, and actually already in 2009 we had a revision where its scope were expanded from energy using to energy-related products. The aim of the directive has been very much in line with the ESPR to continuously improve the environmental performance of energy-related product, and it does this by setting these environmental minimum performance requirements alongside these information requirements. These requirements are all set in these specific implementing measures, or it can also be set in voluntary agreements, and these are product specific. The directive has this life cycle perspective, and it strives to target the environmental aspects with a significant environmental impact, or with where there can be a significant environmental improvement potential. As mentioned also in the beginning, it has worked in collaboration with the EU energy labeling, and it has actually been quite effective in setting these requirements for energy consumption in the use phase. And that's, of course, also related to the fact that many of the product groups that has been regulated by the Eco-Design Directive has been energy using products, and energy use in the use phase has been the main impact. However, as we have moved towards a cleaner energy mix, and also we have over the years improved this efficiency of the product entering the market, then slowly other types of requirements has started to emerge within the eco-design regulation. Some of the first material efficiency requirements that we have seen came in the period from 2009 to 2013 and covered lighting equipment, which was free implementing measures. It covered vacuum cleaners, imaging equipment, which was a voluntary agreement that actually still is so far, and it covered washing machines. Yes. The first round of these material efficiency requirement covered material efficiency aspects related to both reliability and durability. For lamp, it covers lamp lumen maintenance factor, lamp survival factors, a number of switches before failure, premature failure rate, and a rated lamp lifetime. There were also both durability and reliability requirements for vacuum cleaners, both targeting the hose and the motor. For resource consumption, we had requirements for domestic washing machines on the water consumption. And we also had requirements for the use of consumables, both for paper and cartridges. And finally, there were requirements targeting recycling. These covered marketing of plastic and also specific requirements for easy disassembly of certain components. Yeah. In 2015, we know we had the first Circular Economy Action Plan. And actually, in this action plan, also the Eco-Design Directive was assigned a quite important role in a transition towards a circular economy with a specific focus also on the design of products. So one of the things that was done, one of the actions in this action plan was the standardization mandate 543 on material efficiency for energy-related products, where the purpose of this standardization mandate also was to create some generic assessment methods to cover various material efficiency aspects, also to start push more material efficiency requirements into the future implementing measures. The next step in this journey of the Eco-Design Directive is what I have called the Material Efficiency Package from 2019. And it actually covers a number of revisions of existing implementing measures, but also the adoption of new implementing measures, where there were specific focus on these material efficiency aspects in the requirements. And I just listed all the different product groups here. We had a lot of white goods and also electronic displays, computers, welding equipment, and refrigerating appliances with a direct sales function. Some of the material efficiency requirements which entered into these implementing measures were requirements for spare part availability and also the duration for how long these spare parts should be available, along with delivery time for spare parts. It also targeted repair by a requirement for access to repair and repairs. And it targeted upgrade by setting requirements for the availability of firmware and security updates for a certain period of time. There was also a data deletion functionality requirements, so to support also reuse. And again, some recycling requirements for the easy disassembly of certain components, marketing of components and materials. And finally, there were some also some requirements for substances, both restriction and declarations. So what we can see is also here that there has already for quite a long time been a focus in the Eco-Design Directive on material efficiency aspect and also on circularity. And I think that's what we can also see in the ESPR, which is the next step of the journey for the Eco-Design Directive with this proposal from 2022. Yes, Sofie?
Yeah, so I would just briefly go through some of the aspects that we have kind of seen within this ESPR, as it has already been introduced here earlier today. I will not go into detail. However, in continuation of what Anja already said, I would like to highlight that there is this strong focus on circularity in the ESPR, and this is something that becomes evident when you look at the product parameters that it includes, especially aspects such as durability, reliability, and reusability. And that is very much in line with the plans and policies that were introduced in the previous slide. Furthermore, I will again not go into detail, I promise. I will just highlight that in the discussion paper that we have written, we have very much to focus on the two first policy means, So we have been looking into the eco-design requirements and especially the information requirements in terms of the role of the classes of performance and its intended use. Yeah. So first thing first, we looked into the ESPR to kind of see, okay, what does it actually say about the use of these classes of performance? And here we can see that we are to look within the realm of establishing these eco-design requirements, because these will encompass both performance requirements and information requirements. And the information requirements will then, as a minimum, cover the product passport and requirements for substances of concern. However, when you dig a little bit deeper into it, you can see that it also covers the that it also can cover information related to the performance of a product. And it is said that in that case, these can be accompanied by these classes of performance, but that this is something that the Commission should define as appropriate. Yeah, so all in all, what we see is that there isn't that much detail about these classes of performance within the ESPR. So in order to dig a little bit deeper and get some background on the potential role that these performance classes could play, we started to take a look back in some of the background documents. And this case study was also introduced earlier today. It's the case study on the denim jeans that is included in the impact assessments that have accompanied this proposal ESPR. And in here, we found that the case study actually outlines, amongst many other measures, some considerations as to how to establish performance classes. The case study exemplifies that it is the presence of a PEFCR that actually allows for establishing these performance classes of a product sustainability. It also specifies that the performance classes could be determined in a range across a scale ranging from A to E based on the 16 PEF impact categories. The case study then further exemplifies 3 different approaches as to how to establish these performance classes. And it does so based on the PEF method. And it argues that it can either be done based on the total environmental impact of a product, ranging it as a single score. It could also be based on one impact category, such as climate change, or it can be based on some specific processes, such as water use. However, the case study does not go into further detail about how to actually establish the scales of such a score. It only exemplifies it with some generic values. Another aspect that we then found within this case study is related to the proposed circularity information requirements that it outlines. We found it quite interesting that it does not, to the same extent as for environmental information requirements, go into detail with what these circularity measures could be, which kind of makes us ponder a bit on the lack of clarity about how to document and measure the circularity measures. Yeah. So after having established the baseline for these classes of performance within the ESPR, we then took a look at the PEF method. And in here, we found that doing the performance classes is not mandatory in PEF. However, it is something that the technical secretariats can define as they find relevant. So it is something that is being considered. We also found that when you look at the 2021 recommendation on the use of PEF, it actually exemplifies a method for how to establish these performance classes in one of the annexes. And the method that it suggests for establishing these performance classes is to develop a 5-level scale ranging from A to E. This scale is illustrated on the figure on the slide here. It's taken from the annex. And the limits to the scale is to be identified using the midpoint of class C, which would be equal to the values of the representative product based on the second PEFCR. And then you would also need to identify the two extremes of class A and E using the theoretical best performing product and worst performing product, and having assigned some values through them in the PEFCR as well. Then in order to communicate using this A to E scale, you would then need to identify a single overall score. And this score will be the sum of the weighted results across all 16 impact categories in PEF. Yeah, so now we have looked a bit into what is the scopes of the ESPR and what does the PEF method then actually exemplify. So now we will return to the ESPR and then look at how it defines these performance classes. Because here we can see that they are defined as a range of performance levels in relation to one or more product parameters ordered into successive steps to allow for product differentiation. So based on this, it can be argued that the PEF method can be used within this definition. However, it also becomes clear that another approach could be taken where instead of using all 16 impact categories, you can highlight the most relevant or one or more relevant product parameters. So this very much relates to another finding that we have made, which is that as there is no binding requirements on the use of performance classes within the ESPR, much uncertainty remain on how these are to be defined and determined. We can find inspiration based on PEF, but the information requirements, including these performance classes, is something that will be specified in the delegated acts. So more information is yet to come on how these performance classes are to be made, and therefore also the potential application of PEF within this.
Yes. To further look into the potential of the PEF, the role of PEF in the ESPR's performance classes, we did this analysis where we looked into the product parameters identified in the ESPR along with the impact categories that are available in PEF now. And we did these three categories, which category 1, which is the green one, which is covered, which implies that the product parameters from the ESPR is covered to some extent by a PEF impact category. We have this, which we defined as partly covered, which indicates that the product parameters is included in PEF, but it's not intended to be used in communication, not with a specific impact category. And then we have the red one, which is not covered. And this is the table with the results, and I will go through some of the results now. Of course, no surprise, the most obvious product parameters is in the ESPR is, of course, this about the environmental and carbon footprint of products. And what we can actually see is that it is already starting to come into regulation in the preparatory study for PV panels, but also in the preparatory study for batteries and the regulation for batteries, references made to PEF and the PEFCRs. For PV panel, there is a suggested requirement on the life cycle gross energy and also a global warming potential, which should be either based on the PEFCR or on an EPD standard. And also for the regulation, battery regulation, which has been adopted quite recently, there is also a declaration on carbon footprint for the service life of the battery. And for both the product groups, it is either PEF or the PEFCR are either identified as a possible method, or actually these, for the case of battery, it should be a PEF and PEFCR compliant. So we can already see that these types of requirements are entering into to the regulation. For the product parameters on emissions to air, water, and soil, there are some impact categories that could be relevant, like particulate matter, ionized radiation, photochemical ozone formation, acidification and eutrophication, and ecotoxicity. But very much of these or whether these can actually cover these specific product parameters will depend on the product in question, and also if they will be relevant and sufficient. There is also a product parameter in the ESPR on the use of substances. And of course, there are some impact categories targeting toxicity, but we evaluate that these has a limited possibility to be used in the to communicate on this about the use of substances, as they primarily are targeting toxicity in relation to fresh water or humans, and does not say that much about the substances on their own. Then there are, of course, also the impact or the product parameters on consumption of water, energy, and other resources. And here there are a number of impact categories from the PEF that could be relevant, such as resource use, both minerals and metals and fossils, and also, of course, land use and water use. So here we have a number of impact categories that could potentially be used. We also have some product parameters which are more indirect. So they are included in the development of the PEF results, but they are not something that can be directly used in communication. And this covers durability and reliability, which of course should be included or considered in the functional unit if all these 4 principles are applied, especially number 4 about the duration and the lifetime of the product. Yes. The same goes for the product parameters on recycling and amount of waste generated and quality of the recycling and the use of recycled content of the materials, which are also included in this circular footprint formula from the PEF methods. However, for both the durability, reliability, and recycling, we cannot use the result of the PEF directly to communicate to consumer on these types of aspects. Then we found there is also a quite long list of product parameters from the ESPR, which are not really covered by the PEF method or the PEF impact categories. And these are all aspects which are related to what we often refer to as the inner circle of the circular economy, related to maintenance and repair and reuse and reconditioning. But also other aspects such as the use of consumables and the effect of physical factors and software and firmware updates on product efficiency. So there is a number of these material efficiency aspects which we cannot use the PEF method as a way to communicate on. Yeah. This, of course, also relates to the fact that the ESPR not only covers impact categories, but also cover what we have called here product properties, such as durability and reusability and upgradability and repairability, maintenance and refurbishment. And therefore, there is also a need for some additional assessment method for us to be able to communicate these type of product on these types of product parameters. Therefore, in the discussion paper, we looked into some additional assessment methods, and we looked into the 45,550X series of standards, which was the result of this standardization mandate I mentioned in the beginning, 543. And then we also looked into a technical report developed by a Joint Research Center on a scoring system for repair and upgrade of products. And we know, of course, there are many more methods available, but in both these, you could say, initiatives, there are some scoring systems on how we can set up these performance levels in both cases for repair. Yes. The work under standardization mandate 543 resulted in the publication of 8 standards and 1 technical report. And all these standards, they provide these general assessment methods for the aspects highlighted here, and of relevance also when we talk about the ESPR, of course, it's durability, it's the ability to manufacture, its repair, reuse, and upgrade, its cyclability and recoverability, and the proportion of reused component, recycled material content, and critical raw materials, along also with a method for how these information should be provided. All these are, with the exception of 2, are horizontal standard. That means that there need to be developed more product-specific standards. And this process is already on the way for servers and washing machines. There are, however, 2 standards which can be used directly, the one on the critical raw material and the one on providing information. Yes. Just to exemplify about other types of ways to make these levels, we have digged into this about repair, reuse, and upgrade, which is one of the standards which provide this generic assessment method for repair, reuse, and upgrade. And it has these 4 steps it identifies. So first you need to identify the priority part that needs to be included in the assessment. Then you need to identify the relevant criteria for these priority parts. And here all of the different criteria are listed. There are 8 different criteria. And of course, the standard also opens up for other relevant criteria. Then it needs to be signed a ranking or classification for each criteria, and then a specific calculation method should be developed. In addition to this generic assessment or method for providing the assessment on repair, reuse, and upgrade, the standard also provides in Annex A an example of a scoring system for repair, reuse, and upgrade, which covers these 11 criteria, and where the criteria are similar to the energy labeling, scored on a scale from A to E. And it also includes a method for combining these individual criteria score into an aggregated single score. And I won't go through the methods, but I just want to provide an information of how it looks like. For tools, for example, it has this classification of which tool that can equal a class A. So this is if you have the use of no tools, or if a tool is supplied with the product, or if it's on this list of basic tools. And here you can see it also identify all these type of basic tools that are available. And it does this for all of the criteria. So this is another way of making these classes of performance. And what we also can see, quite interestingly, is that we can see references to these new standards on material efficiency, both in the preparatory study on mobile phones and smartphone and tablets, and in the implementing measures and standardization mandate on servers and data storage products. And here we can see there is actually a specific reference to the Annex A in the standard on repair, which I just talked about, where it takes forward this about the disassembly, the way to rank disassembly, and also the availability of firmware and security updates. Then there is also a reference to the standard on recycled content and to the standard on critical raw materials. So we can already see some of these other types of assessment methods entering into regulation. Yes. Sofie?
Yeah. Yes. So I would like to kind of go over the principles of the other scoring system that we have included in our discussion paper, which is the Joint Research Center's technical report. In this report, they identify and develop a general approach for assessing the ability of a product to be repaired or upgraded, and this applies to energy-related products. The overall approach that they outline is kind of presented here on the slide. And as you can see, the general framework or the general approach consists of these 3 different pillars, where one of them is to identify the priority parts. Then it's also about identifying some of the key parameters related to a product. And then it is to outline a specific framework, a scoring framework that can be applied. Then the report also tests the feasibility of this general approach into 3 different specific product groups, namely washing machines, vacuum cleaners, and laptops. This approach is also highlighted as being developed in close connection to the work of the EN 45554 standard that Anja introduced, just to say that they acknowledge that there needs to be this good overlap in the key aspects. What I would like to highlight here, also just on a more brief walkthrough, is the scoring system part of this framework. The Joint Research Center's report outlined this scoring system for classification, rating, and assessment of a product's repairability. And they do so by outlining some different aspects that are illustrated here in the table. So first of all, they outline these pass-fail criteria that determine whether a product is eligible for being assessed in terms of repairability. So after that initial screening, it then moves on into these rating classes where some scoring criteria are outlined and based on the performance of a product across these. And maybe I should add that this scoring system is done on the relevant product parameters. So based on the initial screening of your product, you identify what is the relevant product parameters. And then for each parameter, you assign this score. So the score is then identified for each parameter using the total of each parameter. And then in order to say something about the overall repairability of a product, you then need to aggregate the scores. This is done by assigning a weighting to each of the product parameters, and then you base it on a weighted average. And the overall score that you then come up with then indicate the repairability. And this report suggests that the score should be on a scale from 0 to 1. However, it is also emphasizing the importance of just making sure that it is something that the consumers can relate to and understand. So they are also open towards making it into a 5-level scale or using some other classes to kind of indicate the repairability and upgradability of a product. So all in all, what we have seen with these 2 additional assessment methods is that they both cover repairability and that they actually cover quite the same product parameters with some minor differences. We also see that both of these methods are providing guidance and a better methodological foundation in terms of these more circular product parameters than what can be covered by the PEF method. And this is very much as they outline quite a lot of different technical product elements that are needed in order to fully understand what is the repairability or upgradability of a product. In terms of understanding these aspects related to the need for additional assessment methods, we also kind of emphasize that in order to fully support these information requirements on these more circular product parameters, there can be a need for some new generic standards and some new methods for the non-energy related products. So the last thing that we then unfold within our discussion paper is the implications of using different communication vehicles or choosing a communication vehicle to communicate the performance of a product. In the discussion paper, we go through 3 different approaches on how to communicate the environmental performance of a product. So the first one that we start off by discussing is where you use aggregated single score results across this A to E scale. As I introduced earlier, this is what is exemplified in the PEF annex as a way to do these performance classes. The benefit of this A to E scale is that several studies support that the consumers prefer this easy to understand information and that it is something that they can better understand. However, we also see that when we use this type of communication vehicle, the meaningfulness behind the information becomes quite low, which might lead the consumers to settling with the more average levels as there is so much uncertainty about what is behind these classes. So therefore, we have looked at two alternative approaches. And the first one is then to use kind of similar as in the PEF, where you use a single aggregated score on the AE scale, but you then supplement that score with an outline of the most relevant product parameters based on the specific product group. And by doing so, you would then increase the meaningfulness, or that is the hope that it could increase the meaningfulness and also allow for consumer preferences in the point of purchase. The last approach that we go through is where you use the most relevant product parameters and then display each of these based on this A to E scale. Here you would have overcome the use of weighting, which might have implication when we are dealing with a broad scope, as in the ESPR. And this is very much related to the fact that this will reduce it will increase the transparency and therefore hopefully also the meaningfulness. Yeah. So lastly, I would just like to summarize on our findings in this discussion paper. And I would like to highlight that we have found that PEF can have methodological relevance in terms of establishing classes of performance for product where a PEFCR is present. And the way that it does so is by establishing this 5-level scale ranging from A to E. We have also found that the effects of communicating a product's performance across the product parameters in the ESPR using this A to E scale remains unclear, and we therefore argue that more studies are needed from a consumer behavioral perspective. Another main finding is this need for additional assessment methods on the more advanced circular strategies such as durability, repairability, and reusability. And this is very much related to the focus on the environmental footprint within the PEF and the broad scope of this of the product parameters in the ESPR. And that leads to the last main finding, which is that there is the PEF impact categories and the ESPR product parameters isn't necessarily a perfect fit. So there is this methodological challenge ahead where we need to kind of create this balance between the product impact categories and the product properties that the ESPR also covers. And here we believe that both PEF and the standards has a role to play. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, both of you. And how is it with the discussion paper? Is it handed out, or where can it be found? Or we don't know yet.
We don't know.
But I read it yesterday in the train, so it's out there. Yeah. Okay. Any questions?
It's a Hopru, yeah. Frederick from the Danish EPA. I don't know if you know it, but the authors behind the JRC report also wrote a paper later from TU Delft that is a discussion paper on the repairability index that goes over assessment methods and compares the EN standards with the JRC standard and many other methods. That's a good one to look at. And they kind of also show how these category scales can give a big challenge when you try to aggregate them upwards and how that is solved by just not doing color grades or letter scales before you need to. So it's general more comments. I'll definitely look there.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Charlotte, just besides...
Yeah. Hello, my name is Kim Christensen, and I have two questions. One is, how do you know that it's eco-design and energy labeling that has moved towards renewable energy? Is that documented, or are there other developments in technology that are actually forcing that? The second question, If you do a proper life cycle assessment, I would say that all those product properties are part of the definition of the functional unit. If not, you are not doing a proper LCA. In LCA, you follow the product to the end. So in the PEF-CR for textiles or apparel and footwear, if you have several users of a jacket, the lifetime includes all the users. So it's not one user and then finish. It's all. And this will go the same when you do repair or refurbishment, etc. If the product is intended for this, it should be part of the functional unit definition.
Yeah. Should I answer the first question first, maybe? Yeah, but because that was maybe just an unclarity for my part. So of course, I think what I wanted to say was that the eco-design directive in combination with the EU energy labeling has improved the energy efficiency of products on a European market. And in combination with the fact that we also have a transition of our energy mixes towards greener energy, that implies that when you do the life cycle assessment, maybe it's no longer the use phase, which are the only relevant life stage to consider in terms of requirements. So that was maybe just an unclarity in my presentation. For the second question, I think what we also try to highlight in the discussion paper is that and differentiate between how can we use these as a way to communicate on these aspects, which are the green ones, and then we are aware that many of these things are included also in the calculations, like the durability and reliability and recyclability, but that these type of aspects are very difficult to communicate based on a PEF study. So I think that's what we try to differentiate between. Yeah.
Oh dear. In the PEF-CR for apparel and footwear, they have added annexes, for example, on durability, and they introduce a durability factor. Have you looked into that?
We have not looked into the development of the PEF-CR for apparel, but I think it's really interesting, of course. But I don't think we do not argue that durability is not included in PEF. We know that in the PEF method, we know that it is. We also know that going back, there has been some challenges in defining the functional unit, making sure that it actually sufficiently covers the durability. But I don't think we try to argue that in this discussion paper that it's not included, because it is for sure covered. But we can just not use it to communicate. Then we need some other we need some other ways of communication vehicle to communicate on these types of aspects. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Susanna Horn from the Finnish Environment Institute. And this question came from the previous question actually into my mind. And I don't remember now what it was, but about textiles and durability. So do you remember if there is something about emotional durability and that kind of, because that is a really big factor in textiles, which causes the large environmental impacts. But do you remember anything into the direction of emotional durability being said?
In terms of the PEF-CR for apparel? Yeah, I think I haven't followed it, I must admit. Maybe there is someone else here who has followed it, Kim. But for sure, it's an important factor, the emotional durability. Yeah.
There has been a lot of discussions. They haven't finished or decided yet because it's very difficult. For all other aspects of durability, you have technical tests and you have European standards, etc. But how do you test emotions?
Yeah.
And one attempt has been at least to you look into the market today and you do the representative product as the average of all the averages. In the same way, you can ask the consumers on the likability of the different types of textiles. So do you want to use this once, or do you want to use this for 10 years? And by that, you get a scale of emotion, per se. But still, we need more research, I think, to unfold this.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, okay, last one.
So just to round off, I guess, do you think that organizations should be able to communicate these factors before they have been assessed properly? Because the assessment here is vague. You seem to focus on the communication of these different aspects, but in that process you reduce a lot of the nuances and a lot of the resolution of the assessment. So do you think that should come before the assessment of these parameters? Or why do you focus on them before you focus on the assessment itself?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
No.
So why do you believe that organizations should communicate these aspects before the agreement has been reached on how to assess it?
No, you mean before the ESPR has been finalized, or?
Well, these methods you mentioned are, you said they were communication vehicles. So to communicate the durability, repairability, etc.
They are all all the standards are assessment methods, and they are all horizontal, so they need to be adopted to be more product-specific standards. So they cannot be applied directly. What I think we wanted to highlight with including some of these different standards is that we need additional circularity assessment methods or performance to define these classes of performance. We cannot only rely on the PEF methods for these classes of performance. And then, of course, they need to be developed. And they were also, as I mentioned, they are emphasized in a standardization mandate, or they're mentioned in a standardization mandate for a specific product. So then there will be the process of developing the product-specific standards. So I don't think we should apply the standards yet, but there are other possibilities for making these classes of performance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But we actually are ahead, so no worries if you still have one more question. But thank you for the questions and also the comments. And of course, thank you to you, Anja and Sofie.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Yeah, we could have had a panel discussion as well. Could have been part of the program. We will move on with some international